Hello, everybody, and welcome to the special episode of Prinsights Global, coming to you directly live from the Rick Rule Natural Resource Symposium in Boca Raton 2025. And I'm here and thrilled to be welcoming Frank Giustra, who has so many hats, among them being the CEO of the Fury Group. And I was fortunate enough to be on a panel with Frank the other day here at the conference and have some really interesting conversations with you over dinner. We covered so much ground.
Yep.
But let's start with some of the stuff that's under the ground, which is gold.
Mm-hmm.
You suggested that gold is not as necessarily understood as it should be by many people.
Certainly not in North America. I would say in other parts of the world it's very well understood, and you can tell by the physical flows of gold happening over the last couple of years. It's all heading east, emptying the vaults here in the West, and it's all going east. I think people have been conditioned to believe, at least for the last 50 years, that gold is some ancient relic that has no purpose in the monetary system. And that's certainly the way that the American policymakers have tried to position gold. They certainly tried to tarnish its reputation with respect to it being money. And now we're only now starting to learn that it's, gold is one of the few metals that doesn't tarnish. And so gold has only not been money for the last 50 years. It's been money ever since, for several thousand years. And so I think that people haven't really looked at gold yet as money, certainly, and in North America. But now the fact that it's regaining its monetary status again, it is because of by demand, not by decree. The demand for gold as a monetary unit around the world is causing the gold price to go up. And that's really been the driving factor. It's been all the central bank buying, not the investor buying, but for the last at least, it started about 15 years ago that central banks around the world, led by China, started to buy a lot more gold. But in the last 3 years or 3.5 years, it's been really accelerating in terms of how everybody else is buying it as well. And their central banks are buying it for a reason. And as you might have heard, gold is now the number 2 reserve in central bank reserves. They just overtook the euro, and obviously the dollar is first. And this is all happening while a lot of the world is de-dollarizing, getting rid of their dollars and either buying other currencies like the yen or the euro or the Swiss franc, but more so they're buying gold.
Right.
And I have certain theories about this, and I've talked about them for a number of years now. And I recall, when I started talking about this 6-7 years ago, all I got was an eye roll from people. It's like, you were considered a fringe nutcase if you were ever to suggest that gold will be money, or that the world would actually start getting rid of dollars to look for some alternative way to trade. What we're seeing is that system is being set up right in front of our eyes. It's no longer fringe theory. It's happening. And to me, it's the evidence, and we'll talk about the evidence in a moment, but the evidence is overwhelming. And to me, it's an open and shut case that we are heading towards a new alternative monetary system to the dollar system. So that can evolve in different ways. There was a lot of talk about a BRICS unit currency. I think that's going to be a long way off. It's possible, but I think we're years away from the BRICS coming together and creating a monetary union. That's probably a bridge too far. But what they're doing instead is replacing the dollar for trading purposes. And you have to make that distinction between a dollar that's used for reserve purposes in central banks and what is used to trade between countries. And currently under the dollar system, a lot of the trade around the world, like the majority of trade around the world, is done in dollars. Commodities are priced in dollars, oil is priced in dollars. And now China, again, leading the pack, but with other countries definitely following that lead, are saying, okay, well, let's start by creating bilateral trade agreements to trade in local currencies only. So Thailand and China, or Saudi Arabia and China, or Indonesia and South Korea. There are a lot of, I've seen dozens of these deals talked about and now saying, so there's some arrangement. And the criticism I always got about when I talked about that this trend was switching to local currency, people say, well, how's that going to work when a country has surplus currency that it doesn't need, has no use for, and I'll use example, let's say Saudi Arabia and China, and in bilateral trade, they're trading in their local currencies, and in Saudi Arabia at the end of a certain period has a whole bunch of unwanted yuans. What's it going to do with that? Now, that's what always was the argument against these types of arrangements. But what Mbridge, which is this pilot program that's now been running for 5, maybe 6 years, I can't remember. It was started by China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the UAE, and the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of all central banks. They backed out last year. I have suspicions as to why they backed out. I think there was some pressure on them. But then Saudi Arabia joined. So they're part of the Mbridge project. And there are 31 observing countries that are watching how this plays. And it's a fair, I'll try and simplify what they're doing. They create central bank digital currencies in their home currencies. You say, so Saudi Arabia and China, again, as an example. All Forex transactions and trades are central bank to central bank in these digital local currencies. And it's highly efficient, much faster than the SWIFT system, and much cheaper than the SWIFT. And actually, this whole new system, which we're going to call, let's call it they call it the digital Silk Road. Using, because again, the Chinese are the biggest players in this structure because they're the biggest trading country in the world, so. Going back to what I said about the criticism that, in a scenario where Saudi Arabia ends up with a whole bunch of unwanted yuans. So what happens? These are all the same, Mbridge countries are all the same countries that have been buying gold like crazy, like really loading up on gold the last number of years. So that my theory is this. And secondly, just recently, China has announced that you are now, foreign players are now allowed to exchange your yuans on the Shanghai Gold Exchange for physical gold. And they've set up a warehouse in Hong Kong where that physical gold will be held for delivery. And they're talking about setting them up in regions around the world. I think Saudi Arabia was the other one that was mentioned. So here's how I think it's going to work. And again, this was a theory that actually, you know who gave me the theory? Jim Rickards, about 5 years ago. He says, because we were talking, how would this work? He goes, I think that this is where we're heading. Jim, thank you. I'm not plagiarizing you. And I thought about it more and more. I thought that makes so much sense because they're buying the gold. So what would happen at the end of a period, there's a deficit, there's surplus unwanted currency. They just exchange it for gold and take physical delivery. That's the most obvious role that gold will play. The other one, which may happen, is just a backing of pegging a currency to gold to a certain percentage of its money supply. So much like the U.S. and Britain prior to World War II, anywhere between 20 and 40% backing of your M0 or M1 supply. I'm not sure which ones they use, and actually provide a hard asset back into a currency. They've talked about commodity basket of commodities and currency. It's too complicated. Gold is so simple. It's evenly distributed around the world. Everybody has it. Everybody accepts it as money. And so to me, that'll be the most simple way to back a currency and give it more credibility, like the yuan, for instance. So China, in my opinion, has bought a lot more gold than they've officially. I've been saying it's that for years as well. And then Goldman Sachs comes out last month and go, well, we think China may have up to 10 times more gold. And so that's, at 2,200 tons, they could have up to 22,000 tons. Mm-hmm. That's like 2.5 times what the U.S. has. And I believe that because we've been watching the physical flows, and it doesn't make sense. I mean, you like almost 50,000 tons has moved from the west to the east over the last 30 years, exactly, since 1995. It's not all going to retail hands. It's some of that is being stuffed into institutions, and we'll know about it only when they're ready to tell us. And I started my life as a trader on a trading desk, and I learned one valuable lesson. When you're accumulating a position, you don't show your hand. Because what's going to happen? People will front run you. If they know you're buying a large position in stocks or whatever, you never show your hand until you've accumulated all that you need, and then you can brag about it all day long because you want the share price to go up. And I think that there's a similarity with respect to China. I think so. They're still buying. in my opinion, and so Saudi Arabia, and so are many others. Eastern European countries are buying as well. And I think the Eastern European countries are trying to equalize their reserves as a function of GDP to what Western Europe has. That's, again, I plagiarized that from, if you ever follow Jan Nieuwenhuis, he's a gold analyst from Europe, brilliant guy. He's the one that actually watches the physical flows from all the refineries. He's really good at what he does on physical flows. And so that's my theory but one thing I'm absolutely certain of now is that gold is going to play a role as money driven by the East and the BRICS, and the U.S. is going to have to make a decision about what they're going to do about it. And you've seen Trump's threats. He did it last year with a threat of 100% tariffs on any BRICS countries that do anything to undermine the U.S. dollar. And just recently, last week, he talked about an extra 10% tariff on any country that creates anti-American policies, that, whatever that means. But my attitude is, I think that's a mistake. Listen, you can threaten all you like. You threaten somebody to use your currency, you've lost a war already. If you have to threaten people to use a currency, people use the U.S. dollar because they trusted it. It was the most safe haven asset on the planet for many, many years. Huge liquidity, absolutely safe. U.S. government standing behind it with the greatest military on earth. But when you have to start threatening people to say, well, if you move away from the dollar, man, what would I do? I would panic and de-dollarize faster so that I would not be, potentially sanctioned by the U.S. As you know, the U.S. has sanctioned a third of the world. 60% of the countries have been sanctioned. They're poor countries. So it's no wonder that the BRICS are coming together and going, you know what? For a whole host of reasons, let's have less dollars and have something else. Because if you're sanctioned, if they do to your country what they did to Russia after Russia invaded Ukraine, seized $300 billion, that's what can happen to anybody. And people, that really kicked things into high gear when that happened. So I just think that gold, which was always sold as hedge against inflation, a store of wealth, whatever, those are all fine. But now the real play is that it's going to be money again.
Well, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and all of your insights over so many years. You are amazing. You are inspirational. Gold is good. Thank you so much for joining us here at Prinsights.
Thanks, Nomi.
And thank you to all of you for tuning in to this very special episode of Prinsights Global.